Hi, Dave Rossiter. Welcome to Sensible Horsemanship Tip of the Week. What I'm going to talk about today is what we typically call one-handed riding and neck reining. And it's perfectly fine if you ride two-handed and you really don't want to learn how to ride one-handed or teach your horse to neck rein. It's really a personal thing. But as you get more advanced, and especially if you ride Western, and you're doing any kind of eventing, you know, like roping or cutting or barrel racing or whatever, pretty much you want to have a neck rein on your horse. And then just especially if you're doing everyday stuff as far as working cows or trail riding or whatever. And that's a whole nother kind of issue or topic where we talk about in our level 3 about a fork in the road, which is riding one-handed. So this is Waylon, and what I'm going to do is just kind of give you an idea and philosophy on neck reining, and you know, you go to YouTube and you Google neck reining, or you go buy books or whatever, and everybody's kind of got their own ideas on how to teach neck reining and that sort of thing, everywhere from cowboys who pretty much use their spurs to get the horse to neck rein, to people that like reiners that spend a lot of time and maybe work a horse for a year before they ever introduce neck reining. But the whole principle is that whether you're reining or if you're riding vaquero style or whatever, it's important you learn rein management first of all with split reins. And it's always the rage out there to ride with solid reins because they're a lot easier to manage. But the more time you spend learning to ride with split reins, you can do so much more as far as finesse and feel with split reins. So what I'm going to talk about now is kind of what I call phase 1 of neck reining. And I actually have 3 phases that I teach in our program. But from a philosophical standpoint, what we're doing is really think of 2 things. Think of in true neck reining, what we want to do is pretend that our hands are going to stay in a box, which is about as wide as the pommel of my saddle here, like that, up to about right here. So I want to keep my hands in this like 10 to 12 inch box. And secondly, what I don't want to do is I don't want to put pressure on the horse to get him to neck rein like that, because what I'm doing is I put more pressure there, it's going to pull his nose to the outside. And everything I do with the horse, I want the horse to follow his nose. So from the very get-go, what I'm doing, just like everything else, I think in pressures. And what I'm going to do is I want to think about keeping my hand in the box here, and I want to think about the first piece of pressure or first pressure that I use is my seat, where if I'm going to turn right or rein right, I'm going to get on my left sit bone. Then number 2 is the indirect rein, followed by the direct rein, and then later on, as we get into tighter turns, it's going to be indirect rein, direct rein, and then leg for impulsion. But early on here in phase 1, I'm not going to use my leg at all. And I want to make sure that I don't use the direct rein first, because if I use the direct rein first, he's never going to understand the indirect rein. And if you think about it, this takes time to really get across to the horse, because everything that we pretty much do, like with the direct rein, it makes sense to the horse because they move away from that pressure. Like if we ask the horse to move like that, then he moves, gives to that pressure, and he gets a release of pressure. But when we ask with this rein here, it doesn't mean a whole lot until he understands that something is going to happen after that pressure hits his neck, be it the the direct rein. And horses, it may take like 200 times or 200,000 times for this horse to figure out that this indirect rein means to move away from that pressure. And the only way we're going to do that is, first, before we ever start the neck reining process, we want to make sure that our horse is following, and he's soft, following his nose on a direct rein. Okay, because that is basically the important pressure to, number one, tell him whenever that indirect rein, which is this rein, hits him on the neck, that he is to bend his nose towards the arc of the circle and then come off of that pressure, and he gets the release of pressure from both this one and this one here. Okay, so what's really important to recognize is that every time I lay this rein on this horse's neck, I want him to be conditioned to first know that his nose tips into the arc of the circle that I'm asking him to turn in. Okay, and what I don't want is for this horse, you see a lot of horses that neck rein, but they're like kind of like a stick horse, right? I mean, the horse, he'll neck rein, but his nose doesn't follow the arc of the circle, so he's almost like a board like that, and that's not what we want. As the horse gets more and more advanced, when we ask with that neck rein like that, we want to see that nose tip in based on the arc of the circle or the turn that we're doing. So what I'm going to show you today is what I call phase one. And just to run through this real quick, phase one is basically where I'm riding two-handed and I have my hands together to simulate more of where I'm going to be one-handed. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start off in baby steps where I'm going to come down through these cones and I'm going to work on just laying that rein on his neck after I've asked with my sit bone, and then I'll correct him with my direct rein, or in other words, tip that nose to where I'm not doing a very tight turn, I'm just doing very small turns, so he's starting to equate my seat and indirect rein to move away from pressure here and pressure here. And then once he starts getting good at that, then what I'll do is I'll start doing tighter turns two-handed, and then what I'll do when they're tighter turns, I'm going to start adding my leg to help the horse move away from that pressure. Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to move my hand any further than that box. And people think to get the horse to turn tighter, they've got to go like that, which is what we don't want to do. We want to never move our hand any further than about right there. And then if he doesn't turn off of that, we're going to use the direct rein and then our leg in a tighter turn to make that turn. Okay, so let me just show you here. Well, before I do that, let me show you phase two and phase three, which we'll show you in later videos. But really, phase two is where I start riding one-handed, and when I go turn to the left, I'm going to reach down like this, and I'm going to hold that rein right there against his neck, and then my hand's shorter here so I can tweak him with my ring finger or my Twinkie to set that nose like that. And then when I turn that way, I shift like that, but I'm never going like that. I'm just asking like that. And what I do is when I'm starting to teach this, I'm going back from phase one and two, back and forth till he starts getting it. And that's why it's important in phase one here that I keep my hands together and I don't have them way out like that, because I want him to understand the feel of that, just like when my hand goes to one. And then as he gets more advanced, we can ride like reiners do, like that, or if we're riding Rommel reins, I call it the ice cream cone style, where we can adjust our reins here like this, get him to bridle up like that. And we talk about all this when we, in level 3, when we talk about the different bits as we're teaching neck reining, as we advance them through the different bits that we talk about. So let me just show you real quick. So I've got my reins crisscrossed and I'm holding them like this, and I'm in centered seat, okay? And what I'm going to work on is I'm in neutral here with my hand in the box, okay? So I'm going to get him set up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these cones, and halfway through the cones I'm going to shift my weight, shift my hands, and get him to start feeling and recognize the pressure of my seat, the rein, and setting that nose with the direct rein. So I'm going to go straight here. So my hands are in neutral here. So I'm going to move up, get on my outside sit bone, release. Now I'm going to get on my outside sit bone this way, here. Now I'm going to get on my outside sit bone, set his nose, like that. Then I move it away back to neutral. And I want to always go back to neutral because I want the horse wondering, just like with my seat, what's coming next. So when I come over on my seat like that, there, the horse moved over to the right because I moved off of centered seat. So likewise, I want to do the same thing with my hands, where he's starting to recognize when I move my seat. So now I'm going to move my right seat over, same time indirect rein, feather, then I'm going to move, there, setting his nose, and then I'll just go on a loose rein here, like that. And that doesn't seem like a whole lot, but he hasn't been worked with much on the neck rein. But the more foundation you put on them without pulling them, and your timing's right as far as everything starts with your seat, then indirect rein and set their nose with the direct rein. So let me show you again. So I'm going to be centered seat, neutral. So I'm going to move my hand forward like that, neutral. Get on my left sit bone. Then I'm going to get on my right sit bone. Now I'm going to get on my left sit bone, set that nose. And notice what I'm doing. Let me turn around and show you here. What I don't want to do, that I see a lot of people when they start doing this, is I don't want to move my hands like this. I want to think about keeping my hands level, like that. In other words, I don't want to go like that. I want to work on keeping my hands level, and when I set this against his neck and tweak like that, there, he moves off. Then I'll bring it back to neutral, then I'll set, there. And notice I start with my seat, so I'm going to start with my seat, there, just like that. And then as he gets more advanced, what I'm going to start doing is riding one-handed, and then I'm going to reach like that, and then back to neutral. So I'm thinking neutral with my hand and my seat. And your hand's almost like a joystick, so forward is forward, bringing it back is collection or back up, like that, and then left or right, left, right. But I'm careful to lay that indirect rein on first before I correct with the direct rein. There. Now back to centered seat. But again, just start off with short little turns till he starts getting the idea that he's moving away from that pressure on your seat bone, and then he's moving away from the pressure on that indirect rein, and that way he's going to have a foundation for an excellent neck rein. And the other thing too is he gets better and better at reading your seat. Then when I start riding circles, I can pretty much dictate the size of the circle just by how much outside sit bone I give the horse. And remember, we're always trying to give the horse the advantage of moving away from pressure and away from our pressure. In other words, when I want the horse to go left, I don't lean to the left. I open the door and I push him over like that. I don't go like that. I go like that. So that first off, as he gets more advanced, I've got more weight on his back end to get off his front end. And I'm thinking about, as he gets more advanced, I'm thinking about lifting that horse up like that and not going like that. It's not the old John Wayne style where let's go that way, guys. It's like push that horse like that. All right, hope that helps, and we'll see you next time.